Nicola Sturgeon, barring a thunderbolt, you will be First Minister of Scotland.
Never discount the possibility of a thunderbolt.
I think it's fair to say that on the night, you thought you'd won the vote.
Well, I campaigned all day in Glasgow and we did win the vote in Glasgow. So yes, I believe we were going to win. I think it's fair to say those of us involved in the Yes campaign thought for the last few days of the campaign that we were on course to win.
And were you already preparing negotiations?
Well, we've been preparing within the Scottish Government for some time to make sure that we were as prepared as possible if there was a yes vote. So, I felt huge disappointment on the night. Not disappointment just for myself, but disappointment for the 1.6 million people across Scotland who voted yes.
But it is interesting that right up to the first poll that came out after the vote closed, you thought you'd won.
I thought we'd won, yes, absolutely.
Yeah. You said this morning that you would take a different approach from Alex Salmond. What does that actually mean?
Well, I think what that means is recognising that the different time we've moved into now in Scotland demands a different approach. So yes, I'll argue my corner. I'll argue it passionately, I'll argue it with determination, just like Alec would have done, but I also aim to try to reach out across the party divide, reach out to the many, many people in Scotland who are now politically engaged, who are not in political parties, and try to focus not just on what divides us. There's been a real focus in Scotland between yes and no and what we disagree on in the past couple of years, and that's understandable.
Do you think that was partly because Alec was quite pugnacious?
Well, I think Alec's a fantastic politician. He's a great friend of mine. He has been a great mentor. You're not going to get me to sit here and pick faults in his character, but I think different times demand different skills, and what I want to try to do is have an inclusive style of leadership.
Do you accept that the majority of people in Scotland, as of now, do not want independence?
I accept we didn't win the referendum.
Do you think, though, as Alex Salmond seems to think, that this issue is over for a generation?
Circumstances and the mood of the people of Scotland will determine if and when there's another referendum. I don't think any politician, even if they wanted to, can set a limit on the ambition of the Scottish people. I'm not planning another referendum right now, we've just had one, but circumstances will dictate what happens in the future.
You say you're not planning a referendum soon, but do you rule it out, for example, in the next 5 years?
I'm not going to rule it out or rule it in, because I think that the fundamental point I'm making here is that it's not in the gift of politicians to say to the Scottish people, you will not for 5 years or 10 years, no matter the circumstances, get the chance to say that you want to make a different decision.
You've said that what Gordon Brown kind of promised on behalf of Labour, Liberal Democrats and Conservatives was home rule towards federalism. What do you actually mean by that?
Well, I think it's now for us all to define what that means. I am very clear what I mean. I think we need powers in Scotland that allow us as a parliament to create jobs, to grow our economy, to make sure that we can tackle better the inequality that scars our nation. I met with Lord Smith yesterday, who will lead this process, and I've indicated to him that we will be active participants in this process for change.
What are you actually going to ask for?
We'll be looking for the maximum powers over tax, we'll be looking for substantial powers over welfare, we'll be looking for powers that give the Parliament greater fiscal responsibility and accountability, we'll be looking for powers that enable the Scottish Parliament on issues that are devolved to us to speak up in Europe on these issues.
Do you think, as one of your MSPs, Pete Wishart's been blogging, that you should go into the general election on a Devo Max ticket? Now by that I mean everything devolved, bar foreign affairs, defence and macroeconomic.
We will be campaigning from now until the general election to make sure that the substance and the rhetoric of what is delivered matches what was promised. Now, we did have language used during the final stages of the referendum campaign of Devo Max, of near federalism, of home rule. Now, that has to be delivered.
This scenario was talked about a lot during the referendum campaign, that there is an incoming Conservative government who are committed to a referendum on Europe. And in the course of that referendum, England votes to leave and Scotland votes to stay. Do you think that would be seen as a UK-wide single return, as it were? Or do you think there would be grounds then for going after a referendum on independence?
I think that is one of the circumstances that would make many people in Scotland think that it was time to think again.
In your opinion, do you think people in Scotland would want to leave Europe?
No, I don't think people in Scotland would want to leave Europe.
SNP MPs don't vote on English legislation. Should Labour MPs be doing the same?
I think if I was English, I would see a great argument for the fact that on English issues Scottish MPs don't vote. What I don't think is acceptable, given the promises that were made, is what David Cameron seemed to suggest in the early hours of Friday morning, that that issue should run in tandem with delivering the promise that was made to Scotland. The promise that was made to Scotland before the referendum was made unconditionally.
Do you believe that you'll be First Minister of an independent Scotland one day?
I'd love to think so, but that is in the hands of the Scottish people. If you don't mind, I'll focus for the meantime on my campaign to be the First Minister of the devolved government. I think that's probably what I should focus on at the moment.
Nicola Sturgeon, thank you very much.